Imagine ruling an empire and choosing books over power, knowledge over conquest, and travel over comfort. While the world expected an emperor to command from a throne, Dom Pedro II crossed oceans in search of ideas. He walked through universities, laboratories, and ancient ruins, speaking with the greatest minds of his time. This is not the story of a man who ruled the world. It is the story of a man who tried to understand it. Dom Pedro II was not an ordinary emperor. While many 19th century rulers remained confined to palaces and ceremonies, he crossed oceans driven by curiosity, study, and a deep desire to understand the world. His travels were not simple diplomatic tours. They were journeys of learning. From a young age, Dom Pedro II showed an intense interest in languages, science, history, and philosophy. Fluent in several languages, he read constantly and maintained correspondence with intellectuals from many countries. For him, traveling meant seeing with his own eyes what books could only describe. In 1871, the emperor embarked on one of his most significant journeys. Europe, France, England, Germany, and Italy stood at the center of industrial, scientific, and cultural transformation. Dom Pedro II wanted to experience it all firsthand. In Paris, he attended scientific academies and libraries. He spoke with professors, researchers, and writers. He did not behave like a distant sovereign, but like a dedicated student, asking questions and taking notes. At that time, France was one of the greatest intellectual centers in the world, and the Brazilian emperor absorbed every detail. In England, the impact was different. Factories, railways, and urban infrastructure captured his attention. Dom Pedro II carefully observed how technology was reshaping society. He saw in those advancements possibilities for Brazil's future, especially in education and industrial development. In Germany, he encountered well-organized universities, rigorous scientific methods, and strong state investment in knowledge. This experience strengthened his belief that a nation's progress began with the education of its people. During these travels, Dom Pedro II met some of the greatest minds of the 19th century. He spoke with writers such as Victor Hugo, scientists like Louis Pasteur, and inventors including Alexander Graham Bell. On one occasion, after witnessing a demonstration of the telephone, he was deeply impressed by humanity's ability to create something so revolutionary. Rather than seeking luxury or extravagance, the emperor preferred museums, schools, factories, and observatories. He walked, observed, questioned, and recorded everything in his notebooks. Every detail mattered. Every experience became a lesson. These journeys shaped not only the man, but also the ruler. Dom Pedro II believed Brazil needed to connect with the world, learn from other nations, and invest in knowledge as the foundation of development. His travels were an essential part of that mission, but Europe was only the beginning. Dom Pedro II continued traveling with the same restless spirit. After Europe, he turned his attention to other continents, eager to understand cultures beyond the European tradition. He believed that knowledge had no borders and that every people had something to teach. During his travels through the Middle East, the emperor was fascinated by ancient history. He visited Egypt and walked among temples and pyramids that were already ancient long before the rise of Rome. Standing before those monuments, he reflected on time, the endurance of civilizations, and the fate of empires. In the Holy Land, he passed through cities filled with religious and historical meaning. He observed local customs with respect and curiosity, carefully noting the coexistence of different beliefs. For Dom Pedro II, understanding human diversity was essential to ruling wisely. In North Africa, he took interest in irrigation systems, local commerce, and the trade routes connecting the Mediterranean to the interior of the continent. Once again, he behaved not as a tourist, but as a careful observer of social and economic structures. At another point in his life, Dom Pedro II traveled to the United States. The young nation attracted his attention due to its rapid industrial growth and technological progress. He visited universities, factories, and scientific institutions, engaging in long conversations with researchers and inventors. In the United States, the emperor closely examined the education system and the encouragement of innovation. He saw a model that could inspire changes in Brazil, especially in technical and scientific education. Throughout these journeys, Dom Pedro II maintained a simple routine. He dressed modestly, avoided excessive ceremonies, and preferred long conversations over formal speeches. Many foreigners were surprised to discover that the calm, curious man before them was, in fact, an emperor. Each journey expanded his worldview. Each country reinforced his belief that progress depended on knowledge, education, and dialogue between cultures. For Dom Pedro II, to govern was, above all, to learn. And while the emperor accumulated experiences around the world, Brazil watched from afar a ruler who seemed more like a citizen of the world than a monarch bound by borders. Dom Pedro II's travels gained a new meaning as the years passed. No longer only the journeys of a reigning emperor, they became the path of a man increasingly distant from power and deeply connected to ideas. As political tensions grew in Brazil, the world outside continued to attract his attention. In Europe once again, Dom Pedro II returned not as a curious visitor, but as a familiar presence. He was welcomed by universities, academies, and cultural institutions that already knew his reputation. He attended lectures, debated philosophy, and followed scientific discoveries with genuine enthusiasm. In Italy, he showed particular interest in art, archaeology, and the preservation of historical heritage. He walked through ancient ruins, studied classical architecture, and reflected on how civilizations rose and fell over time. These reflections would later influence his own understanding of Brazil's future. His travels were also marked by long periods of silence and contemplation. Dom Pedro II often spent hours alone, reading or writing. His notebooks were filled with thoughts about education, politics, and the responsibility of rulers toward their people. As the Brazilian monarchy weakened, the emperor's journeys became more frequent and longer. In many ways, traveling offered him refuge from political instability. Yet, even far from home, Brazil was never absent from his thoughts. In 1889, the monarchy fell, and Dom Pedro II was forced into exile. Once again, he crossed the Atlantic, this time not as emperor, but as a man stripped of his crown. The journey was silent and heavy, filled with memories of a country he would never rule again. Exile did not extinguish his love for knowledge. Settled in Europe, Dom Pedro II continued visiting libraries, museums, and scientific institutions. He lived modestly, relying on books and conversation rather than titles and honors. Despite losing the throne, he never expressed bitterness. Instead, he dedicated himself entirely to study and reflection. His identity was no longer defined by power, but by intellect. In his final years, Dom Pedro II became a symbol of a vanished era. Scholars, students, and thinkers sought him out, not to meet a former emperor, but to speak with a man who valued wisdom above authority. His last journeys were slower, marked by age and declining health, yet his curiosity remained alive. Even near the end of his life, he continued reading, writing, and engaging with new ideas. When Dom Pedro II died in exile, far from Brazil, his life stood as proof that leadership could be guided by learning rather than ambition. His journeys across the world were not escapes from responsibility, but expressions of his deepest belief that understanding the world was the first step to improving it. And so, the story of Dom Pedro II's travels is not just the story of where he went, but of what he sought: knowledge, dialogue, and a future built on education. Dom Pedro II's legacy continued to grow even after his death. The places he visited, the people he met, and the ideas he absorbed became part of a larger story that extended beyond his lifetime. His journeys had planted seeds that would only be fully understood years later. In the years following his exile, many intellectuals began to reflect on the meaning of his travels. They saw that Dom Pedro II had used movement as a form of resistance against ignorance. While others clung to power, he clung to learning. His path across continents was also a path away from authoritarian rule and toward dialogue. Letters written during his travels reveal a man deeply concerned with the future of education. He often compared schools, universities, and teaching methods from different countries. These comparisons shaped his belief that Brazil needed broad access to education, not just for elites, but for the entire population. Dom Pedro II also believed that science should serve humanity. During his visits to laboratories and observatories, he questioned how discoveries could improve daily life. He admired nations that invested in public knowledge and criticized those that treated education as a privilege rather than a right. His travels exposed him to different political systems, from monarchies to republics. Rather than rejecting these differences, he studied them carefully. He understood that no system was perfect, but that societies progressed when leaders were willing to learn from others. Even in exile, Dom Pedro II remained emotionally connected to Brazil. He followed news from his homeland closely and expressed concern for its political instability. Though he no longer ruled, he still felt responsible for the nation's moral and intellectual direction. As time passed, his figure transformed in public memory. He was no longer seen only as the last emperor of Brazil, but as a traveler, a scholar, and a symbol of enlightened leadership. His journeys became a metaphor for curiosity and openness in a world often divided by borders and ideology. Today, retracing Dom Pedro II's travels is more than a historical exercise. It is an invitation to reflect on leadership, humility, and the value of knowledge. His footsteps crossed continents, but his ideas crossed generations. Dom Pedro II showed that true power does not lie in authority or wealth, but in the willingness to listen, to observe, and to learn. His travels were his classroom, and the world was his teacher. And in this sense, the journey of Dom Pedro II never truly ended. Dom Pedro II's travels also changed how Brazil was perceived abroad. In academic circles, he was known less as a monarch and more as an intellectual. Professors, scientists, and writers spoke of him with respect, often surprised that the ruler of a distant South American empire was so deeply engaged with global debates. During international exhibitions and congresses, Dom Pedro II walked among scholars as an equal. He listened more than he spoke, absorbing discussions on astronomy, engineering, linguistics, and archaeology. These moments reinforced his belief that nations advanced through cooperation, not isolation. He paid special attention to how countries preserved their history. Museums, archives, and libraries fascinated. He believed memory was essential for a nation's identity, and that forgetting the past weakened the future. This concern followed him throughout his journeys, shaping his thoughts about Brazil's cultural heritage. In conversations with young students and researchers, Dom Pedro II often encouraged curiosity and discipline. He believed talent could be found anywhere, regardless of social class. This idea, radical for his time, was strengthened by what he witnessed abroad. Societies that invested in education produced innovation and stability. As he aged, travel became physically demanding, but mentally necessary. Even when his body slowed, his mind remained restless. He planned visits carefully, prioritizing places where learning was possible. A library was more valuable to him than a palace. His final journeys were quieter, marked by reflection rather than discovery. He revisited places he loved, not to learn something new, but to reconnect with ideas that had shaped him. These moments carried a sense of closure, as if he were retracing the path of his own life. Despite exile and loss, Dom Pedro II never renounced his identity as a Brazilian. His travels had taught him that belonging was not defined by borders or crowns, but by memory, language, and responsibility. Brazil remained present in his thoughts until the end. Looking back, his journeys reveal a rare form of leadership. Dom Pedro II ruled without obsession for power and traveled without desire for conquest. He sought understanding, not domination. His life suggests that the greatest journey is not across oceans, but toward knowledge. And in choosing this path, Dom Pedro II left a legacy that continues to inspire those who believe that learning is the true foundation of progress. Thus, the story of his travels stands as a reminder that curiosity can shape history, and that an open mind can be more powerful than any throne. Dom Pedro II's journeys can also be seen as a quiet dialogue between Brazil and the world. Wherever he went, he carried questions about his country's future. He observed how other nations dealt with poverty, education, science, and freedom, always comparing those realities to Brazil's challenges. In his notes, there was no arrogance, only concern. He admired progress, but he was also critical. He understood that blindly copying foreign models would not solve Brazil's problems. What mattered was adaptation, understanding context, and respecting cultural differences. Travel taught him nuance. He often reflected on the responsibility of leadership. Seeing different rulers and political systems strengthened his belief that authority should serve society, not dominate it. Power, in his view, was temporary. Knowledge was lasting. Many who met Dom Pedro II during his travels later wrote about him. They described a man of calm presence, modest behavior, and sharp intelligence. Few could believe he ruled a vast empire. He seemed more comfortable among books than among soldiers. As decades passed, the world changed rapidly. New technologies emerged, empires weakened, and republics rose. Dom Pedro II witnessed these transformations not as a distant observer, but as a traveler moving through history itself. His journeys placed him at the crossroads of an old world and a new one. In exile, distance gave him clarity. Removed from the burdens of power, he reflected deeply on his reign. Travel had prepared him for loss, teaching him that nothing, neither crowns nor borders, was permanent. Even without returning to Brazil, his influence endured. Ideas he defended, education, science, dialogue, continued to echo in Brazilian thought. His travels had spread those values far beyond his own time. Dom Pedro II did not conquer territories. He collected experiences. He did not impose his will. He absorbed perspectives. Each journey refined his understanding of humanity and his place within it. His life suggests that movement can be a form of wisdom. By stepping outside one's homeland, one learns to see it more clearly. Dom Pedro II traveled the world to better understand Brazil, and in doing so, he transformed travel into an act of learning, humility, and quiet legacy. If you enjoyed this journey through the life and travels of Dom Pedro II, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Leave a comment sharing what surprised you most about Dom Pedro II, and tell us which historical figure you'd like to travel with next. Your support helps this channel keep exploring history beyond borders.